you're all familiar with already. And the partnerships the duration of the partnership is indefinite. So this is all the legal documentation that's required to actually form the partnership agreement. So the way that a partnership agreement works, it's similar to a company. If you're familiar with an incorporation, so an INC or an LTD company in British Columbia, in that it's composed of ownership units, whereas a company has a share structure and issues or allots shares to the shareholders. In this instance, the terminology is a little bit different, and there is an issuance of units. So units represent the capital that's invested by the limited partners into the partnership that is going to be utilized to operate the business.
Right.我可以给大家翻译一下啊，就是说这个 limited partnership 是它一般的公司运行的一个方式，它和我们的公司运行的形式是比较接近的。它的基本的这个出发点就是 limited partnership 它的责任呢，它分成两部分，一部分是 general partner， 一部分 limit partner。limit partnership 它的这个责任是更加专一的，也就是说更加单独的、更加有限的，是这样的这个情况。我觉得 Steve 会对这个文件讲的就一直讲下去。我不知道大家需不需要我翻译，听起来我觉得大家的英语水平都比较高。如果大家不一定需要我翻译的话，那我就让 Steve 就一直解释下去了。这样，除非大家如果需要哪一个部分需要更多解释的话，你们在 chat box 里面可以直接打也可以，或者 message 给我也可以。因为我觉得 Steve 解释的还是比较直白的，比较通俗易懂的，是这样。那个安娇老师，你觉得这样行吗？还是说我过段时间要翻译一下，你们觉得比较好？
我们往年的做法就是说，都是律师就直接先讲完之后，您可能把一些重点的东西呢，您就可能就会比较辛苦，翻译那个人就比较辛苦，把重点。当然，我想你这可能也不用特别的记，因为你这些东西你都懂嘛，你做了这么多年，就是说把他刚才讲那些重点，你可能记下来。就是他先讲完之后，如果您可以用中文再穿一下，或者之后我们再用中文讨论，让律师先走。就这样的，可以让这个律师就是到时候他因为说真的，律师1个小时几百块钱，我们也是付费的，所以我们当年都这样，律师咔咔先讲完，我们有问题英文先问，之后的话就是如果干嘛的话，就是您在最后的时候再给大家再讲解一下，可能就怕有人理解的不够准确呀，是这样子的。我也不知道，我们往年是这么做，看看大家的意见，如果有什么不同的意见，大家都是我们本来就小组嘛，就这么就10个人而已，所以的话大家都是可以提出来的。但是往年就这么着，如果可以的话，我们就先这样让他直接先穿下来，因为他有时候来回翻译吧，会有的时候也挺乱，就是那种感觉。
对，完全同意哈。那这样子，那我们就让那今天就让Steve 律师让他先解释完了之后，因为这些合规这方面我也知道，所以有需要解释的，我到时候再解释。我们大概最后会留出一段时间来给大家，就是说如果需要再进一步探讨的话，可以留段时间给大家。那如果是这样的话，那我们就照这样的方式来执行。So Steve, please go ahead. So our discussion is that we'll let you explain the whole document. And I'll take notes. In the meantime, if anyone will have a question, then we'll leave some questions some time at the end of the meeting. So either you or if I can speak of you, if I can explain, then I will try to explain. If not, then I will turn it over to you to do the explain. So the process will be, we'll let you introduce the document and describe the document. Then
sure.
From there.
Okay, sounds good. So the issuance of units, so there's a minimum units contribution of $150,000. So that's the sort of the floor investment that must be made to participate in the limited partnership. This share of profits sets out how the profits are to be shared. So it's done on a quarterly basis. So every fiscal quarter, there is a nominal amount that goes back to the general partner. And then to the Class A units, I understand from Bill that the Class A units have not been utilized yet, so this can effectively be ignored. But it's the Class B units that are actually receiving a return of the profits. So they share pro rata. Pro rata simply means equally, until they've received an aggregate amount each fiscal year of the partnership equal to 3% of their capital contribution. So they can receive a return on capital of up to 3% per year. So that's how that works. And then if there are any remaining after that, if there's any amount of profit that remains after each Class B unit holder has received their 3%, then the balance is distributed as follows. So 70% would go to the Class B unit holders, and then 30% would go to the Class C units. So the Class C units, and maybe Bill, you can expand on this if you'd like, just let me know, is reserved for the management.
Sure. 刚刚这个 Steve 跟大家解释一下，它的基本上公司的这个它分成3个不同的 class。Class A 呢是现在只是做一个留用，目前还没有使用。Class B 是我们所有的 limit partnership 来投资的这个。Class C 呢属于这个管理层的一个 class。那么具体上来讲，就给大家会有每个季度的这个分红分给大家。那么在满足了这些给大家分红和满足给大家这个财务的要求基础上，更多的这个利益呢是按照3期开的方式，70%是去到 Class B 的这个分成，30%去到 Class C， 大概是这样。
So the right to return contribution, so a limited partner, once you invest inside of the partnership, you can only get your capital if the partnership is dissolved or wound up or liquidated. So essentially if it's terminated or if the partnership itself is sold. So just for clarity, you can't just pull out your capital when you wish. I'm not going to explain every single clause here because the document is far too long for that. So I'm just going to limit my explanation to the most important parts. So this just number 13. This breaks down the distinctions between the Class A and the Class B units. This essentially just sets out that the Class A units do have voting rights, and they participate in the capital and in the return of the profits in a similar manner, to the Class B units. So the Class B units, they participate in a similar manner as well. But importantly, what you should note is this piece here, that the general partner may at any time repurchase any Class A units, provided that the owner of said units has already received their distribution with an aggregate amount equal to their capital contribution plus an 8% per annum return. So this basically means that after a Class A unit investor has already received a return on their capital and their investment, they can be bought out at the general partner's discretion. So whereas this provides more limited protection for the owners of the Class B units. The general partner can repurchase any Class B units by purchasing them out for fair market value. So there's no sort of requirement that that the owner of that unit have already made back their capital. They can be bought out at any time for fair market value. The Class C units are just for management. So the general partner must get the limited partner's consent by special resolution. Special resolution typically means a threshold of 75%. We'll just need to refer to the definitions section. Yeah, so in this case, it's 75% as well. To be able to sell or otherwise dispose of all of the interest in the partnership. Similarly, the general partner is if the general partner declares bankruptcy or otherwise begins an insolvency proceeding, then they would need to step down as general partner and would need to appoint a successor. This also sets out the terms whereby the general partner could be removed. So similarly, if this would only happen if the partnership collapsed, if it was dissolved, if there was a special resolution. So a vote of 75% of the limited partners in compliance with the other terms inside of this limited partnership agreement, or upon the death or incapacity of the general partner, of course. And this just authorizes the partnership to continue to operate and do business in spite of the fact that the general partner might become disabled, might die, might withdraw, or become insolvent or bankrupt. So this is the notice of registered office. The registered office just is a formality. So this is the formal location, the law firm's office where the records are kept and where they can be inspected if you're not doing it over Zoom. So this is the actual limited partnership agreement. And so we'll just go through the contents first. That might be, so yeah, so the limited partnership formation and name, status, business, registered office. So the business is essentially going to be, that's an important definition in any of these types of agreements. Essentially, it's just going to set out what's the scope of the type of business that it's engaged in. Here it is managing the apartment building. That's the registered office. The duration is indefinite. The fiscal year, we'll zoom into that in a moment. And these are the limitations on who may become a limited partner, and we can go into that. The continuation is going to be a recapitulation or a restatement of what I set out above, that the partnership can continue. Authorized capital, that sets out the nature of the investment and how the investment into the general partnership is recorded. Unit subscription, again, gets a little bit more granular. These are the specific legal mechanics for how units are subscribed for. So a subscription simply just means it's kind of like a purchase order. So when you purchase units or shares, there is a form that you need to fill out that we can take a look at later in the call, and that needs to be filled out in order to receive the units, and of course payment needs to be made as well. Management by general partner. So this is going to set out the scope of authority that the general partner has, some specific powers, how the general partner can get compensated or reimbursed for expenses that it incurs. Indemnification provisions, which is essentially, because the general partner will incur certain liabilities, this provides a certain degree of protection for the general partner. And these also, the removal of general partner, we covered that earlier. Special resolution, removing the general partner, withdrawal, resignation. So those are all sort of terms that we looked at earlier on in the certificate. The limited partners, so limitation on authority of each limited partner. So this is all pretty straightforward boilerplate language that will set out that the authority of the limited partner to engage in the business and to actually be operational and have a management role is non-existent, essentially. If the limited partner loans in any money or is loaned any money, then this will set out the guarantees for those amounts. Allocations and distributions. So this is going to set out how tax works within a partnership. I mean, the general principles with a partnership are that it's taxed in the hands of each individual LP. So every individual LP is going to be responsible for reporting their income or their loss if the partnership does not return a profit on their own. So the partnership is essentially a type of flow through structure where the income and the tax is allocated to each of the individual partner LPs. Meetings, this is the formalities around how the governance structure of the LP works. Registrar of Records and Reporting, transfer of units. So transfer of units, this has to do with what happens if one of the LPs wishes to get out, and we'll dive into that a little bit. And dissolution, that covers off what happens at the end should the partnership be dissolved or terminated, and how the assets are distributed upon one of those events occurring. So again, I just will reiterate, this is a long document. We can't possibly cover everything in the amount of time that we have today. So this is going to be a very high level explanation. So the business, again, 28 unit residential building on the lands being in Langley. Registered office, fiscal year is December 31st. The duration of the partnership is indefinite. These are the formalities that must occur for a limited partnership to join. This restates the continuation piece. So it's A, B, C units. We've covered all this earlier in the discussion of the certificate. So this private issuer, this specifies that there are restrictions on the right to transfer any interest in the partnership. So this limited partnership agreement is going to govern the ability of any LP holder to transfer its units. So it's very different than owning shares in Apple or another public security, which you can just liquidate and transfer on the open market at any time. This is to ensure that it's in compliance with securities regulations, so that it is under the 50-person MAC before it needs to have more rigorous reporting obligations to the Securities Commission. So units subscription for units. This sets out, it's the initial $150,000 minimum capital contribution. These are some basic representations of the general partner, that the GP is a corporation, incorporated in BC, in good standing, which simply means that it's current on its annual filings, that the GP has requisite capacity and corporate authority. GP does not and will not conflict with the GP's articles. The GP will never borrow any money from the LP. And the GP has a duty to operate in good faith in the best interest of the limited partners, and to act honestly and with integrity. So this sets out the broad scope that the GP has. Essentially, the GP can do anything that it sees and is in the best interest of the partnership to advance the business of the partnership. So specifically, it can do all of the below, including providing management, financial planning, entering into agreements, investing into property, developing, constructing, improving, tearing down, so making modifications to the property, selling the property, entering into other partnership agreements, other joint ventures, lending money, exercising a limited power of attorney. So yeah, exercising the power of attorney rights, borrowing money, renewing leases, mortgages. So essentially doing anything. Like there's really no restrictions on what can be done, provided that it's within good faith. So you can dive into this at your leisure, but yeah, I don't think there's a lot of value to be added here by reading off everything here. So reimbursement of general partner is essentially just a clause that sets out that the GP can be reimbursed for any expenses that it incurs while carrying out the business. So power of attorney. So this is important. Each LP is essentially signing off on a power of attorney, which is a type of limited power of attorney that enables the general partner to substitute themselves for that LP and act as if they were that person to do the following things in order, essentially, to carry out the procedural, corporate, legal business of the partnership and sign off on instruments, declarations, certificates, any types of mortgages or guarantees or security that are undertaken by the partnership, any type of filings that are done with the land title office, any other tax elections that the GP deems necessary. So essentially just to deal with the bureaucratic compliance work, and then to enter into legally binding agreements on behalf of the partnership, the LP is signing over this limited power of attorney. And it is enduring, which means that it will exist even after the fact of an LP becoming mentally or physically disabled. So standard of performance, this essentially just holds the GP to a standard of care where the care, diligence, and skill of a reasonably prudent person, and also imposes an obligation to maintain the information held as confidential. So the LP will indemnify and save harmless the GP and its directors, officers, employees, and agents. So that essentially just means that the limited partnership will backstop any the general partner's actions that the general partner carried out on behalf of the LP, so long as everything was performed in good faith, was not negligent, and was not for the purposes of fraud. So, however, this does not mean that the LP's liability to indemnify the GP is not going to exceed the amount of capital that's contributed to the limited partnership. So these are certain limitations on the GP's powers, including the GP cannot cause any limited partnership to guarantee any obligations or loans to the general partner. Will not commingle, or mix up the funds of the LP with the general partner's own funds. And will not ask for additional capital contributions unless having received approval by 75% of the existing partners. We've covered this before, covered that. Limited partners. So these are representations that each limited partner is going to make. They are importantly not non-resident of Canada. They must be Canadian resident under the Income Tax Act. They must be adults, and they must have competence, they must have capacity, legal capacity, mental and physical capacity to sign the documentation. This sets out that the rights of the limited partners to participate in the management is very limited and can only provide comment essentially on the management of the business. So they just don't have any rights to control how the business operates. So the GP will indemnify and stay harmless the LP from all losses and liabilities incurred by the LP as a result of the GP's breach of its obligations under this agreement. So if the GP acts in violation of this agreement and that causes harm or a loss to an LP, to the LP, then the GP will indemnify them and make them whole. An LP must withdraw from the partnership if any of these circumstances occur. That is, if they change if their status under 6.1b changes at all, that is, they become non-resident, then they essentially need to get out, and this is done for tax reasons. So yeah, as an LP, you should be, if you are planning on becoming a non-resident, then you should probably not invest in this partnership. So any person who signs or delivers a guarantee or indemnity to any lender on any financing will be entitled to a fee from the limited partnership. So this is essentially if you're being asked and in fact guarantee any types of loans for financing that is required by the partnership, then there is some limited compensation here. Allocations and distributions. So the GP will establish and maintain a separate capital account on the LP's books for each partner. GP will, these are the mechanics for how the allocation of the net income is calculated. We did go over this earlier in the certificate, which is a fairly tidy summary of the primary mechanics of how this partnership works. So I'm not going to restate those here, but yeah, this is essentially how that works. This provides the GP with some discretion in how the revenue and expenses are allocated, which is essentially done for tax reasons. Profits are going to be distributed on a quarterly basis. If there are any overpayments or underpayments, there's going to be an adjustment that occurs. This sets out the mechanics for how those payments occur. This is the set of accounting principles that will determine how much the size of the profit and loss. Return of capital. So again, I'll just restate this. An LP can only return its initial capital contribution if the partnership dissolves or is otherwise wound up. And if an LP is required to withhold its income, there will be a withholding. So this is just generally done for tax purposes. If there is a requirement under the Income Tax Act, this usually would only occur if there is a non-resident LP. So meetings, this just sets out how the meetings occur, what quorum is. Generally, it's going to be 60%. So it sounds like the GP can convene at any time, or if 60% or more of the limited partners call for a meeting, then they can set up a meeting within 60 days. Quorum is as long as you have 50% of the outstanding units, essentially, in the limited partnership and 2 or more members, then that is quorum. And this is how proxies are used in case you're not able to attend in person. So special resolution, these are powers of the limited partners if they have 75% of the votes in favor of a specific special resolution. They can do the following: remove the general partner, amend the agreement, terminate the partnership, continue the LP if it's already been terminated by operation of law. So if there's a bankruptcy or a death, waive default to allow for a curing period, and a variety of other things, including, come to agreements with creditors, etc. Sets out how the minutes are to be kept, registrar, records, and reporting. This just sets out how the company records are to be maintained. Transfers of units. So this is more important. So each limited partner, you cannot transfer without the consent of the general partner, unless the following conditions are satisfied. So there are certain documentation that needs to be completed, and the transferee has agreed to assume the obligations of the transferor that pertain to the unit as complied with section 2.7. So 2.7 being restrictions on becoming a limited partner, A, B, and C. They acquire their capital account. They've paid the amounts, including legal fees, required to enter the partnership, and these other formalities. So the right of first refusal, essentially, if a limited partner wants to get out, they need the consent of the general partner to do so, and they must also provide notice to the other limited partners that they want to sell, and give them the opportunity to purchase those units. So if those units, and they have the purchasers, the other limited partners have at least 75 days to make up their mind and make a decision. And so the recipients can accept within 15 days, and they can purchase all of them. And if they do not, then the offerer can sell to other persons, so persons outside of the partnership, who might want to be admitted to the limited partnership. Liability on transfer. So the liabilities are going to be whatever liabilities exist with respect to that are attached to owning a unit are going to be transferred to the new owner. So it just sets out what happens in the event that somebody becomes incapable or it passes. And so a mandatory sale of units, if a GP receives a bona fide offer from a arm's length party to buy all of the units of the LPs, and that offer is accepted by a special resolution, then everybody is going to be required to sell their units. So this is a type of drag along provision, essentially, to ensure that any holdouts are going along with the sale. So dissolution of the partnership. Partnership will be dissolved if there's a termination or a special resolution authorizing the dissolution of the partnership. And this essentially is the order of events of what happens if the partnership is dissolved. So the GP is going to liquidate everything. They're going to sell all the partnership properties. So the apartment complex and any other assets of the partnership. They'll collect all the proceeds of that liquidation, and then they will pay down all the other existing outstanding expenses and liabilities, and then eventually return what remains of the capital to each limited partner and GP. So there's a property management fee. So a property management contract that will be entered into a CWI Columbia, and they will be responsible for managing the property. So they'll be entitled to a fee equal to 0.9% of the value of all the assets owned by the LP. And there is a fee payable to CWI Columbia, an acquisition fee of 2.5% of the purchasing price of the property. And everybody who signs on to this is bound by a confidentiality agreement. So this information is confidential. It's the entire agreement, and it's governed under BC law. This is the form of a certificate. So if you are already or will become an investor in Eastleigh, then this is the type of form of certificate. I'll pause there, Bill. Are there any questions or anything that you want to communicate or clarify? Just unmute. Sorry, Bill, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thanks, Steve, for the explanation. I will try to explain in different language. 谢谢这个刚刚律师解释了一下，这个刚刚律师走过了，就给我们解释一下整个这个 limit partnership 的这个 agreement， 大概的它的几个要点就是注册它的 certificate 是什么样的 certificate， 这个公司注册呢是注册在我们公司的这个律师的这个地址，就是公司是有它的公司地址在律师那里，在律师事务所。另外他解释了一下他这个 limit partnership 它的 unit 跟 share 之间的这个关系，它相当于一个公司的 share， 它就相当于一个投资的单元。另外呢也解释了这个 GP 和LP 的它的这个责任，它的要求啊，它各自的所行使的权利。另外也解释了3种这个不同的 class A、class B 和 class C， 前面已经解释过。另外也讲了一下关于这个作为 GP 来讲怎么来代表 LP 来运行公司的这些 business， 还有一个部分是讲的这个公司的这个税务的安排。正好前面有人在问，我看哈，有人在问这个 tax 的问题。公司在这之间，在 limit partnership 在结算之前，每个季度给大家的分的这个钱，或者是每年给大家分的这个钱，我们都是以 return of capital， 就是给大家还本。这样的话呢，它从这个 tax 来讲的话，它不属于这个收入，所以它就不会发生这个税务上的这个问题，是这样。另外呢，也讲了关于这个如果大家要 transfer 的话，如果这个投资的单元如果要是转让的话，它的转让的程序是什么？那么最后一个解释一下，如果公司要是就是说这个物业如果是卖掉的话，它一个分配的这个过程，基本上来讲，它是先解决这公司的自己的债务，然后再给大家还本，然后多有的利润呢，就按照原来我们讲的3积分的方式分给大家，就大概解释了这么一个过程。这样，这是我这边给大家解释的这个内容，看看大家有没有其他的这个问题。Okay. So far, I explained to the point that Steve made in the walkthrough of the document and highlighted some of the key points of the document. I think so far it looks like we're okay with the questions, but I'll leave the floor open if anyone have questions. 如果大家有什么问题的话，大家随时可以提出哈。This is for the document itself. We still have some time. Steve, do we need to go through the subscription document or process? The reason is that once the investor reads through out the agreement and then decided to join the partnership, then they will sign the subscription document. 从刚刚大家的这个程序上来讲，大家如果读过了这个Limited Partnership 的这个合同之后，要投入这个我们的项目的时候，他就会签一个 subscription， 就相当于一个注册的这个文件。前面我们讲关于注册这个文件，主要的尤其是关于我们合同当中有一个很大的部分，就是说我们是比较强调符合BC 省证券所的这个证监会的这个要求。证监会的要求呢，就是第一个。就按照证监会的要求，他需要对投资人有一定的要求，就是说他的投资的量和投资身份有一定的要求，其中包括也不能是外国人等等这些。另外呢，我们也会根据证监会的这个要求，对大家所有的 document 也符合证监会的这个要求。证监会如果对像这种 accredited investor 的这个投资的这个过程，它需要一个明确的一个 subscription process。我们这个文件也是按照这个证监会的要求来完成这个 subscription 的这个 process， 是这样。So, Steve, I just explained to people that because we're a private issuer, according to BCSC, that private issuer need to have certain process to do. One of the processes is subscription process. So I try to explain to people that. After people read through all this agreement and agree with the document, then the next step will go through the subscription process as required, otherwise as recommended by the BCSC.
Sure thing. So this is the subscription agreement. So yeah, essentially this is a private entity. So this is not regulated it's not a public security. So it's not listed on any sort of exchange. This is a private limited investment. The BC Securities Commission regulates these limited partnerships to a certain degree. There's essentially a type of waiver that needs to be signed off on by anybody who chooses to invest into these types of partnerships. So first of all, if anybody is a accredited investor, an accredited investor, the definition generally means that you have liquid assets north of more than $1 million of liquid assets available to you. So that of course does not include the value of a home. And a certain annual income threshold. If you are an accredited investor, then there are certain, you're able to just skip ahead. You'll fill out to page 18 there. Otherwise, for everybody else, you are going to need to complete this. Payment is going to be made payable to Eastleigh Village Apartment Limited Partnership. So the subscription agreement, yeah, it's much like a type of purchase order. So you're putting in an order to purchase Class B units. The number of units is filled out here, the purchase price, and then if you're filling them out, if you're owning them as joint tenants with your husband or your wife, then you would click that. You'll need to talk with your own lawyer about which one is more important for you if you're owning this jointly. Yeah, and this is essentially the exemption that, because it's a limited, smaller type of investment opportunity, there's an exemption available under the BC Securities Act that permits these types of investments to not have to file a prospectus. So normally a prospectus is a very long document that sets out makes a lot of disclosures and a lot of commitments, and this permits it to not have to complete that. So again, if the accredited investor exemption is here, so you're going to need to just read through this and see which one would apply to you. if any. So this, is essentially like how you qualify to be an accredited investor. So so again, yeah, if you have $1 million more of liquid assets or $5 million of total assets, or income of $200,000, or that of you and your spouse of $300,000 or more. And there's a variety of others, but most of these are not going to be relevant to you unless you're acting on behalf of a corporation or a trust company. So it sets out the minimum investment, $150,000. And this is an exemption. So if the accredited investor exemption does not apply, this could apply as well. So directors, family members, close personal friends, and that needs to be defined, and a close business associate, etc. So these are various exemptions that could qualify you to be able to invest and in this partnership. This just sets out the mechanics for how you would complete the investment. You provide payment, complete everything, provide a copy of the wire transfer confirmation, any other documentation that's required to complete the purchase and sale. The issuer will deliver a certificate to confirm ownership. And the issuer can make use of the funds immediately. And these are various covenants that you specify as a subscriber or an investor that you have done. So essentially reading all of this documentation and understanding the nature of this type of investment. This just sets out that you have authority to do so, that you're resident where you say you are, that you recognize that you are not entitled to receive a prospectus, that your rights are limited. There's no review by the Securities Commission. So the Securities Commission has not examined this partnership, this investment opportunity. So it's not a public company. You recognize that you cannot sell these ownership interests except according to the terms of the limited partnership agreement. That this is speculative, and that don't invest in anything that you are not prepared to lose. There's no guarantee with any investment. That you've had an opportunity to avail yourself of independent legal advice, and this is not independent legal advice. I'm not providing independent legal advice to any of the investors on this call. And that you warrant that none of the money that you are investing is as a result of a proceed of crime. And that you're not a US person. These are just various basic representations that the issuer is making. Use of information, and that's about it. Definitions I won't get into. And that's about it. And then, yeah, so this certificate would need to be filled out as well. You understand that you could lose everything. You can't liquidate your investment. You're not going to won't necessarily receive a whole lot of information about it. And then you can't get advice on the viability of this investment. And this is just how you tick off your status as an accredited investor. So that is about it. That's about it, Bill. Yeah.
谢谢这个 Steve 今天给我们花时间讲解了关于这个 Limited Partnership 的这个文件大家也可以知道这些文件是比较长的。那么非常高兴这个 Steve 和他们这个律师事务所提供的这些的解释。平时我们这些 legal document 我们知道就是比较漫长的，我通常花几天甚至几个星期的时间把每一条都把它理解。所以基本上今天解释的过程是这样，大家有什么问题的话，现在欢迎现在可以有时间可以提出这样的问题基本上来讲就是前面的这个文件呢是解释关于这个 agreement of the limited partnership， 那么后面这个文件是整个 subscription 的这个要求，就是根据BC 省的这个证券规定，就是这证券所的规定，它要完成这个整个一个 subscription 的这个过程，所以我们就 go through 这个 subscription 的这些文件，大概是这样。